lazy, entitled, no commitment, no work ethic. When I surveyed 100,000 managers across the globe, these were all the answers to the same question. What do you think of your Gen Z team members? Gen Z, born between 1996 and 2012, they are the digital natives, trendsetters, are future politicians, future leaders, and they currently make up about 30% of our workforce. That number is going to increase every single year for the next 20 years. But one thing that we can all agree on is how we manage Gen Z hasn't quite been figured out yet. But to understand what these people need from their workplace, we must first understand the world that they were brought up in. As of today, on average, we spend 7 hours a day on our phone. Just let that sit for a second. 7 hours every single day. Social media, filters, unrealistic expectations for our life, for the world that we live in. This is the way Gen Z were brought up. Authenticity really took a backseat. But what that really means is Gen Z can smell your BS from a mile off. And then transparency. We've been told to dress a certain way, look a certain way, act a certain way at school and at work. We hide our profit and loss from our employees. We hide salaries from job ads. Everything we have been used to in the workplace is untransparent. And this lack of transparency doesn't just mean things like pay inequality. It also means Gen Z's trust in their workplaces has been completely diminished. When they enter the workplace, they start with a complete lack of trust in its leaders and in its businesses. But to be fair to us, trying to figure out how to keep Gen Z engaged, challenged, and happy at work isn't for lack of trying. We have tried open plan offices. We have tried unlimited holidays. We've tried work from home and then don't work from home. But open plan offices, although it sounded fun, like the human connection, sat talking to your work bestie all day, what we realized is people were just distracted. And I've worked in open plan offices and it was always really difficult to actually get any work done. And whilst it seemed fun, everyone in my team at the time would just go and hide off in meeting rooms because they wanted to have some peace and quiet. Unlimited holidays. Some of the most progressive companies in Silicon Valley, San Francisco, tried giving their whole team unlimited holidays. Take as many as you want. But all it meant in reality was people didn't feel entitled to them, so they didn't take any holidays whatsoever. And nothing has had quite as much impact on our workplaces today than the global experiment that we all took part in, which was the COVID pandemic. All the jobs we used to think had to be sat chained to a desk behind a computer screen, we have come to realize we can do almost all of them just as well from home. So whatever your opinion on Gen Z and the world they've grown up in, we can all agree we haven't quite figured out how to manage them yet. The supply of management we have today versus the demand and expectations of Gen Z for leadership is so far apart and is getting further and further apart by the day. So what do we do? How do we catch up? How do we close the gap? About 8 years ago to the day, I graduated from one of the top business schools in the country, did a business management degree. Now, I don't have a photo of me graduating because it was on my 21st birthday, so I didn't go. Priorities, much to my mum's dismay, it's out there. But let's just pretend that's me. Graduated from one of the top business schools in the country with one of those fancy pieces of paper. And I did a business management degree. So we were taught how to manage teams, how to manage businesses, how to manage finances, etc. So when I landed my first proper job out of uni, managing a team of 8 people on one of the busiest shop floors in the world, Harrods, what could possibly go wrong? I knew everything. I'd read every single book. I'd sat in every single lecture theatre, and I'd listened to every single professor tell me everything there was to know about management, right? But sadly, all those outdated management theories didn't help me much on the ground. And I was a crappy manager. I avoided difficult conversations. I avoided giving people honest feedback. I was ultimately just a crappy manager, and I never ever felt good enough to lead a team. Until one day, sorry, got a bit wrong. I never ever felt good enough to lead a team. But over the next 5 years, my career was a little bit of a strange and unusual one. I moved into a startup in the tech world. I was the second member of the team. And over the next 3 years, we grew and grew into a multi-million-pound company. I went from executive assistant to marketing manager to operations director. And eventually, we sold that company to a £2 billion corporate. And now when we sold the company, I went from operations director in a very small team, in a very small company, to all of a sudden being operations director in a team with 11,000 people, managing 5 different teams across the globe. And it was a very different world. With all that going on, I still never felt good enough to lead a team. Until one day, one of the senior managers in learning and development at the company came to me, and she'd been noticing that I was pioneering a new wave of leadership. My Gen Z team members were happy, which was unheard of in corporate. We did these surveys across the company every quarter to understand how happy people were, how fulfilled they were, how challenged they were. And the scores that I was getting were really, really high. And she'd said to me, can you come and lead a workshop for some other senior managers on how on earth we manage Gen Z? And I'm like, but I don't know how to do it myself. I don't know what I'm doing. But I put one together, 5 principles that I've been doing every single day, been working towards that I didn't even kind of realize that I was doing. And I started running these workshops. The response was just, it was almost like pioneering this new wave of leadership that now we're in this remote first, flexible first world with Gen Z coming up through the ranks. People were thankful that we were making changes in management. The first of those principles was transparency. Has anyone heard of Netflix? Yes. One of the biggest companies in the world. 220 million subscribers, £25 billion in revenue. And one of the co-founders and CEO of Netflix cited that the most important move they ever made in their culture, so important that he wrote a book on it, was this principle of opening the books. Opening the books for all of the thousands of their employees to see the financial data, to see customers coming in, customers coming out, how marketing works. They essentially made the back end of their business so transparent that everyone in the business could make much better decisions with all the information that they had. And so, when I read this a few years ago, I put it into our business, building what I called a stakeholder report so that the entire team could see what the money that was coming in, the money that was going out, the customers that were coming in, the customers that were coming out. And ultimately, the team felt so much more empowered. They felt like human beings, contributors, instead of cogs in a machine. But transparency doesn't just have to be financial data. Transparency could be something as good as something as small as admitting when you make a mistake or being honest about a certain piece of difficult feedback. The next principle is authenticity. So remember when I said that Gen Z can smell your BS from a mile off? The managers that will win, the managers that will build the best, healthiest, most fulfilled organizations today are those who will undo the fact that the world is so inauthentic. The managers who are willing to drop the telephone voices, drop the guards, drop the barriers, and be the most authentic version of themselves. Progression. The only way we can be truly satisfied and motivated at work is when we feel a sense of progression. Now, the word motivation comes from an old Latin word, which is motivus, which literally means to move forward. The only way, truly, we can feel motivated is if we are moving forward in something. Now, ideally, that would be our roles, responsibilities, salary maybe, where we are in the company. But I appreciate that's not always possible. So when that wasn't possible for me in my management role, I would make sure the team were always moving forward in something else, like their skills, the value that they bring to the world. If I could ask them more questions to get to know them better, to understand how I could help them progress further down the line. Next is elasticity. So if I just cast your mind back to the work from home versus office debate, we live today in something called the gig economy. That means if your team member wants to pick up a quick job on Uber, if they want to sell something from their spare bedroom on Etsy, if they want to sell food on Deliveroo, if they want to rent out their spare room on Airbnb, they can do so with such low barriers to entry. We live in the gig economy, and ultimately for businesses and for leaders, what that means is our team don't need us that much anymore. We don't rely on our full-time salary as much as we used to. The world of entrepreneurial opportunity exists like it never has before. So when as businesses we start to put barriers and cages in place, saying things like, you must come into the office for 5 days a week, you must be here at 9 a.m., you must come and work behind a desk with a laptop, with a computer, our team will just rebel. Because there is ultimately no need for them to be there. They have other ways of making money. We have to make our guidelines as elastic as possible. We have to give people as much freedom as we possibly can over their time, over the tasks and how they complete them. And then lastly is safety. 50,000 years ago, we relied on our tribe for safety to help keep us safe, our tribe and our instincts. And only when we were safe could we focus on things like social interactions, education, new skills, new tools, innovation, only when we felt safe at the core. Now at work, we have to make people feel innately safe as well. Safe to fail, safe to experiment, safe that they're not going to feel embarrassed. Because if we don't make them feel safe at the core, they won't be able to make social connections, they won't be able to upskill themselves, they won't be able to find new tools. And so if we don't make them feel safe, and I'm sure all of us have been to work and felt like this at some point, you go in with your defenses so far up because all you're trying to do is not rock the boat. You're trying to keep yourself and your job safe. So why would you innovate? Why would you come up with new ideas? All you're trying to do is say the safest thing possible. We can keep our team safe by, so something that I used to do was build failure into reporting. So at the end of every month when we have those monthly metric reviews where we look at KPIs, have we hit them, have we not? Build failure into that reporting. How many experiments have we run this month? How many of them failed and how many of them succeeded? Another way I would make my team feel safe is just by being really vulnerable myself, like admitting when I was wrong, admitting when I was making a mistake, being okay to feel embarrassed sometimes myself. Now, the next time we think they're lazy, entitled, have no commitment and no work ethic, I understand there is friction, and always has been, between new generations and the way they've been brought up and the way they come into the workplace. But the question I'll ask you is this not the world that you want too? For your kids, your grandkids, for your team, for your workplace? A world that relies on the principles of transparency, authenticity, progression, elasticity, and safety. Management right now is broken, but if we commit to these principles, we truly can make the world a better place to work for everyone. Thank you.